We are dead in the middle of the busy summer travel season. And some people go by car, and some people go by plane, and others by bus or boat. And I want to talk about air travel because air travel more and more seems to be going sideways for us. And it becomes increasingly frustrating, and you just want to lose your mind. Do you ever feel stuck? The alarm goes off, and you think, is this really my life? Do you wish you could douse your relationships or your career or even your business with rocket fuel and throw a match on it? End the blah once and for all. They either launch or they burn up and you get to start over. I've been there and I see you. I'm Ben Walters, an entrepreneur, pastor, coach, and consultant. If you're ready to get unstuck and ignite your super pumped life or business, I'll give you the rocket fuel and the match. All you have to do is light it. Air travel more and more seems to be going sideways for us. And I think part of it is we know that when we travel by car, we have some control. We can determine when we get off or, when we stop for the night or kind of how far we go, that type of thing. But in air travel, you make a deal with the airlines to go from point A to point B at these times. And then you largely lose control. And so I think that's part of the broader struggle for us. But this conversation about air travel goes back to the episode I did about how I missed a couple of flights and ended up parlaying that into meeting my wife. And a lot of you came at me and said, well, you're just the luckiest guy in the world. That doesn't happen for most of us. We're stuck somewhere and our flight's miserable and our whole trip is ruined or our vacation is ruined or I missed my key presentation in business. And so I thought, well, am I lucky or am I just good? Now, I don't say that in arrogance, but I say that as a sense that sometimes when you do things enough, you learn some little tips and tricks. And often it's because I learned them the hard way. I learned them through things going sideways and not being very good. And so I was working on this episode and I was writing the first part on a flight. I was going from Cincinnati to Boston through LaGuardia in New York City. And so, beautiful day. The plan was I was going to go and meet my daughter who lives in Boston, and we were going to go to the Red Sox game. And I was jacked. To go to a game at Fenway is a special thing to begin with, but then to be able to see the Reds, who have a really exciting team, and just experience that with her was going to be a lot of fun. And we were going to go with some of her friends. I was going to get to meet them. So it was all going to be awesome. And I left on a morning flight. So I figured plenty of time, quick connection. I was supposed to be in there around 4 o'clock. I start writing this podcast of just general tips and tricks of how to make your air travel better. And as I'm writing that, I land in LaGuardia and I've got it mostly written. And so I have a quick turnaround between the flights and I land, I go to the connecting gate and I barely even got there. And then the words you hate to see, delayed. And it was delayed an hour. And so I thought, okay, this isn't good. And then I went to the Sky Club, Delta Sky Club. I have a membership to that, which is a great perk. And we'll get into that later. But I ended up then having two more delays. And then they just started canceling flights like crazy. Now, I'm not sure what was going on. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. There were flights canceled up and down the East Coast, even though it looked like a glorious sunny day. I didn't see any weather on the radar, but it ended up at one point I was looking at the board and every flight was either canceled or delayed except one. It was Norfolk, Virginia. And I happened to say, where are you headed? To the person next to me, a woman. She said, I'm headed to Norfolk. And I said, well, you must be the luckiest person in the world. And so the line was long to try and rebook. It was a mess. And so I thought, well, I guess the flight gods are trying to tell me we need to talk about when things go sideways. And so the first thing I'm going to tell you when your flight gets canceled or delayed or something goes wrong is that your attitude will determine how this turns out for you. And that is so true in life, not just in travel, but in business and in relationships. The outcome you think is going to occur is going to occur. If you think this is going to just be the worst thing ever and a terrible tragedy and stressful and horrible, you're going to get that. But on the other hand, if you think, well, this is an opportunity to do something different, make a different plan, maybe see something new. Or, like I did in the case when I met my wife, parlay that into some extra nights of fun in a city and a hotel and ended up with some first class seats. You can do that too. So you're ultimately the captain of your ship. With that in mind, though, there are some things I think you can do to set yourself up for success. So the first thing is the amount of baggage you have determines your level of flexibility. So once you check a bag, it is much harder to jump around flights because the first question they're going to ask you is, did you check bags? And if you say yes, then it requires a whole lot more work for them to do anything other than, I would call it, the path of least resistance, which is usually not the greatest path for you. So, if at all possible, don't bring a ton of stuff on your trips. And I talked about that in a previous episode. You can do laundry outside of your own home. You can have people do that. And often it's cheaper than paying the bag fee. You can also bring things that you don't have to bring back, that you can just discard or donate, that don't need to be with you. So try to pack light. And if you need to do some laundry, go buy a CVS and get an extra pack of underwear if you have to, or socks. But you don't need to bring the kitchen sink with you. The other thing to remember is delays and cancellations happen all the time. We know we're so self centered at times and we think, oh, the world's caving in because I had a delay. Well, this happens hundreds, sometimes thousands of times around the globe every single day. So relax. It's all going to work out. You are not going to be stuck in said place forever, whether that's home or whether that's somewhere you travel to. Now, in the same breath that I say relax, I'm also going to tell you, and this is an important thing, speed is of the essence. So, in other words, when a flight gets canceled, there are limited number of seats to be rebooked on. And the people who get after it first are the ones who are going to get those seats. So, how do you position yourself to do that? Well, the first thing, and I talked about this in the previous episode, is you need to be aware. You need to have done your research on how to get from point A to point B, not the flight you were on. So, let's take, for example, if I was going Cincinnati to Phoenix via Atlanta, and then a big summer thunderstorm rolls through ATL and just shuts those operations down. I need to know in my head, okay, there's a flight through Detroit I can get there. There's a flight through Minneapolis. There's a flight through Salt Lake City. Maybe there's a flight through Los Angeles. Sometimes you have to either undershoot or overshoot your destination in order to get there. This sounds really crazy. Sometimes it's quicker to go to Phoenix by popping back to New York, the complete wrong direction, and then jumping on a flight from either LaGuardia or JFK straight to Phoenix. So you need to know those routings because it's going to become important when you do that. So speed is of the essence. Have a game plan in place. The other thing you need to know in advance is what other airlines fly that route. Because if it's weather, you're kind of stuck. But if it's maybe they didn't have enough crew, that happens sometimes. We're seeing a lot of that in Newark this summer. If it's the airline's fault, they really need to rebook you and get you there within a certain time frame. And they don't want to rebook you on other airlines, but they will if you ask nicely enough. So speed is of the essence. Then you want to try and get in front of a human being as quick as possible. So the first option, if you're out at your gate and it gets canceled, if you can get to the gate agent first. But that one is a bit of a tricky one because that line tends to fill up the fastest. The customer service person says, I'm sorry to inform you that flight 234 to LaGuardia has been canceled today. As soon as they say that, everybody goes to that line, right? So if you happen to be by the gate and you can get in the first few, great. But if not, hustle yourself down to what they call a rebooking counter. Most airports have this. It's just a dedicated section where they have multiple customer service agents and they can help you. You can also get on the phone with your airline. Try to reach that. Those, most of the time, those will tell you how long the wait is. So you pretty quickly know if it's a 4-hour wait, don't bother. But that's also another option. Oh, and the other part is once you get in those lines, start working the app to see what you can come up with. Remember, you've already researched it. So you know, bam, I could go through Detroit and maybe get there even earlier or within an hour or whatever that routing is. So see if you can do stuff on the app while you're waiting to talk to a human being. It's kind of a twofold thing. Now, here is a critical piece to this. Often the rebooking place has a huge line, and the gate agents have huge lines to get in front of somewhere. Do you know where I recommend you try to go if possible? The Sky Club. So it's the Admirals Club if you're American, or it's the United Club if you're United, or it's Sky Club if you're Delta. Because in those kind of preferred clubs, those are for the elite flyers, the people who fly a lot. Those folks at the customer service level are trained to do this and really take care of their best customers. Now, you may say, well, how can I go to the Admirals Club if I'm not, an elite flyer or I'm not a member of that? Well, most of those have day passes and they're capacity limited, but you can go up and say, you know what, I'm willing to pay that $50 today. I want a day pass to that. Then you've got dedicated representatives to help you. Often you get word of the next change quicker than the people out in the common areas, I would call them. And then the third thing is you've got a comfortable place to kind of regroup. So within that, you've got free food, free drinks, you've got a nice restroom, you've got pods if you want to go in and make a series of phone calls, but not be just inundated with people around you. You've really got a lot of resources. Some of them even have computer terminals, which is really cool because sometimes, at least for me, it's hard to rebook on your phone because it's so tiny and then you got different screens, difficult. But man, when you have a big, 20-inch screen and you can put multiple tabs open and you're looking at different airlines and different routings, you can get some stuff done fast. So try to get into one of those elite lounges because it'll make your time a lot better. The other thing I would recommend, there is a game show. It's called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I'm sure some of you have watched it. But in part of their questions, when they're stuck, which is what you are once your flight gets canceled, they have an option called Phone a Friend. Now, I want to tell you, this is a very good idea to have someone in your pocket, or maybe two or three people in your pocket who you can call who could also be looking up possible options. And I tell you, my kids do this a lot. They're flying here to there, and all of a sudden something goes sideways, and they call and they say, "Hey, Dad, I'm stuck in at DFW because of a thunderstorm, but I'm trying to get home, or I'm trying to get out to see, my friend Liam in LA." And so then, if I have time, I'll jump on and see what I can figure out. And I'm working on it. He's working on it on the app, and meanwhile, he's got someone working in the Sky Club or the Admirals Club on it. And all of a sudden, you're putting three heads together to problem solve just for you. It's a really cool way to do that. So don't be afraid to reach out to others who might have access to more stuff. The more minds working on anything, whether it's a problem in our personal life, whether that's a problem in our business or our organization, really is an asset. What do they say? Two heads are better than one. So phone a friend, get them involved, and you'll be flying like a millionaire. I've talked about the airline lounge and how there is just such value in that. The day pass is maybe $50, so not terribly hard, right? The other thing in the airline lounge, and this is a boss move, but pay attention to what other people, the rebooking options. Often, a lot of the same people that are in there talking to the agents are also on your flight. And so they might say, "Hey, we can put you on a different airline. We're going to put you on United instead, and you'll go right there and be there at the same time." And so, what do you say? You're like, "Hey, I just happened to hear that, down there they were able to put those good folks on another airline. Is it possible you could do that for me?" And sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. But again, and it goes back to be nice, don't demand it. I see this so often where people become very entitled when something goes haywire. I saw a guy making a complete jerk of himself on a plane because he was in the second to last row and he was a whatever elite member. And this was ridiculous. He only flies on the front of the plane, blah, 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 blah. Well, do you know what? Nobody cared. Not his fellow passengers, not the staff. It didn't move him up. In fact, I find that when customers start throwing around the weight of their credentials that I paid for a first class seat or I'm this level of medallion or whatever it is. Often the person on the other end shuts them down really fast. Whereas you could have a person with no status, right? Who's super nice, super kind, thoughtful. And do you know what the person on the other side of that computer who's rebooking you? They'll help you. So treat the people nicely and they'll treat you nicely. Because conversely, if you start taking out all your stress and all your anger about the fact the flight was canceled, it's not going to go well. And I talked about that in the episode about how I met my wife in Johannesburg, how I ended up parlaying that into a lot of good things. So be kind, be nice, don't get haughty, don't rant, that kind of thing. Now, if you really need to be home, also consider changing airports. That's another one. So, like I've talked about in Cincinnati, I've got 5 other airports within a 2-hour drive. Now, is that convenient? No. But if I had a critical soccer game of one of my kids the next day that I did not want to miss, or I had a big presentation at work that I couldn't miss, then maybe I would have to fly to Indy and figure out how to get from Indy back home, or Columbus or Dayton. It all depends what you're willing to do on your willingness to be flexible. So, going back to LaGuardia's story on trying to get to Logan for my daughter and for that Reds Red Sox game, they kept canceling the flights, and over time, they ended up that day canceling 140 flights out of LaGuardia, and that happened just in the afternoon. It wasn't the morning flights, and that's when I was there. And so there were 5 flights to Boston in that period when I was there. 4 out of the 5 were canceled. And so only one little CRJ, the little regional jet, went to Boston that day. And I was lucky. I got the very last seat on the plane. It was like 20D in the CRJ. And so I made it there, but I didn't make it. I actually missed the game. So that was a real bummer. But along the way, as all these flights are being canceled, do you know what else I'm looking at? I'm looking at the Excella train up to Boston. I'm looking at buses out of Penn Station that might get me to Boston. I'm looking at all kinds of other things that I could do. Could I get to Manchester, New Hampshire? Could I get to Providence? How can I get up there? Maybe I could go over to JFK or Newark and catch a flight. So you've really got to be kind of nimble when it comes to that. You can even consider driving one way. I've had the case where I was in Detroit and I just needed to get home, and it's about a 4-hour drive. And I ended up renting a car. It was from Hertz, and I rented the car, drove home, turned the car in at the airport, all good, made it home. So be flexible. Now, if you don't need to get home, this is where the actual fun comes in. And this is what happens when I ended up meeting Kristen and getting a spouse. So that's pretty awesome. But if you don't need a seat and things are going sideways for the airlines and seats are at a premium, you can negotiate for all kinds of things. You can negotiate for hotels, you can negotiate for first class flights, maybe the next day or 2 days later. You can negotiate, maybe you were going, on a routing where you had a connection to go to a city. Well, maybe you negotiate for a nonstop on that flight. And then a lot of times they're now giving gift cards. They don't just give airline vouchers, they give gift cards for all kinds of things: Amazon, American Express, Visa. So tons of options. And so you could end up like in New York, let's say your flight gets canceled home, right? And you decide, I don't need to sit here hoping the rest of the night that I can get there. And you go up and you propose to the airline, hey, listen, I'll go tomorrow afternoon. By then, you'll have cleared out the capacity. I just need a hotel in Midtown and a gift card for $400. Then what do? You go to that hotel, use that gift card on a last minute Broadway show ticket, and bam, you're seeing a Broadway show staying in Midtown Manhattan or Times Square, or wherever you want to stay, wherever they give you to stay for free. For free. How is that? Talk about turning lemons into lemonade. My son and I did this with a Dodgers game. We were going from Cabo back to Cincinnati through Los Angeles. And so we flew up to LA, and then it ended up being canceled. And so it was interesting because there were 5 of us in the family, or maybe 6 on that trip. And most of the people wanted to get home. So they ended up taking an alternate routing and making it a little bit later that night. But he and I were flexible. And so we asked the airline, we said, any chance you could put us up maybe in downtown LA and give us a gift card? And sure enough, they did. They gave us a Visa card. And we ended up taking that Visa card and we bought Dodgers tickets and we went to the game. We bought all kinds of snacks on that Visa card. I mean, we didn't pay a dime, and then stayed in downtown LA, ate at a couple of food trucks that later that night, they have the best late night food trucks. And so we ended up having a fantastic time, all because we were flexible on getting back, even when things went sideways. So that was really cool. One other thing I want you to understand or know about is luggage. So let's say you have luggage, right? But you can't go to Dodger Stadium dragging a rolling bag or dragging a big backpack. They have a clear bag policies, but they have this company and these apps called like Stasher, and there's some other ones in different parts of the country. But I was looking it up when I was going to Fenway. But you basically, it's either hotels or convenience stores right near wherever your destination is. And it's super cheap, like $6. You can leave a bag with them for whatever you're going to. So in our case, we had a hotel, so we put the bags at the hotel. But when I was going to Fenway late, I was able to go to a convenience store, stash the bag, and then pick it up after the game. How cool is that? Versus trying to go to a hotel, check in, hold the luggage, miss the game, that kind of thing. And that's also a cool thing if you have a late flight. If you have a late flight and you're going to be in a city all day, you don't want to drag that stuff around all day. So have fun that day. I see so many people, they're like, well, my checkout of my hotel is 11 a.m. My flight's not till 7 p.m. So I guess I got to go to the airport and sit for 8 hours. I'm like, yeah, you can. That's miserable. I wouldn't do it. You stash that stuff. Don't worry about it. That is a really cool option. Those are some things. One other thing I want to remind you of, and I talked about this in the last episode, is if you have a really early morning flight, don't check out of your hotel right when you leave the hotel to head to the airport. Let's say your flight's 6:30 in the morning. Don't check out, because most of you should have the app. You should have mobile checkout, right? Go to the airport, make sure the flight's on time. Once you get on board and you know you're going somewhere, then you can check out. Do the hotel that courtesy. But until then, keep that hotel. Because if they cancel that flight and they put you on a 2:00 p.m. or a 6 p.m. flight that day, guess what? You can go back to the hotel and go for a run, take a shower. You can decide if you need to work and do some remote presentations. You've got a workspace. If you want to take a nap, you can do that. You've already paid for that space. So why voluntarily give that up before you know you're going to get to your destination? To review, always have a plan in advance. And when you're in that, you got to work quick. You've got to get in front of somebody, but you're also working the app as you're waiting to get in front of somebody. I would also encourage you, if it's a complicated one and there's big demand, phone a friend, let them work on it too. Also, get into the airline lounges. So much of our stress in travel is because we don't eat enough or drink enough, and we're just compressed with all these people. That's kind of a respite, an oasis where you can catch your breath and have people take care of you. So it's worth the $50 to go in there. Remember to stash your stuff in cities or in hotels through the Stasher app, or just pay your hotel to keep it a little bit longer for that day. And finally, remember that your attitude and how you react to this thing that's happened to you that you may view as a negative, how you react to that is going to determine whether it's a positive outcome or a negative outcome. And I encourage you to make it a positive outcome, because that canceled flight might lead you to someone or something or some event that is beyond your wildest dreams and is awesome. So happy flying and have fun out there this summer. Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped podcast. If you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app and tell your friends about the show so others can find and benefit from the Super Pumped community. And finally, to put the ideas from today's show into action, visit us at superpumped.com to view the show notes, book a complimentary consultation, or take our free business launch readiness assessment. Keep well, and I'll see you next time.